Welcome to the deep dive. We take the source material you share, we pull it apart, look for those crucial insights, and basically put it all back together so you walk away really understanding the core issues. Today, we're getting into, well, one of the really fascinating contradictions from World War II. We're talking about the M4 Sherman tank. You know, the absolute backbone of the Allied armored forces. A legendary machine, sure, but also, it turns out, a bit of a logistical nightmare. And the person who cracked that, not some high-ranking engineer, not a decorated officer, no, it was a 19-year-old farm kid from Iowa, high school education, figured out how to fix these vital war machines, like, 3 times faster than the official army way.
It's just a brilliant story, isn't it? It
Yes.
really highlights that clash between, practical smarts and just rigid rules.
Exactly.
That's the real heart of it, I think. This tension between ingenuity that's literally born out of battlefield desperation and the military's need for, well, unwavering regulation. And this mechanic, we're calling him Jimmy Morrison, based on the accounts, he had to keep his methods secret, totally under wraps for months. Because, breaking the rules like that, it could have ended very, very badly for him.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We want to unpack the Sherman's fatal flaws, and there were some big ones. We'll look at the maintenance crisis that honestly almost stalled the Allied advance in late 44.
Yeah, it was getting critical.
And we'll explore how the sort of common sense thinking of this farm boy, the guy who just dared to ignore the manual, ended up saving the whole armored repair effort. So yeah, get ready. This is where the rules get broken, but for all the right reasons. Let's dive in.
Okay, so to really get why Jimmy's contribution was so huge, you have to understand the tank itself. Picture this. June 1944. D-Day's happened, but the Allies are getting chewed up in the Normandy hedgerows. It's dense, nasty fighting.
Yeah, brutal terrain.
And the M4 Sherman is absolutely everywhere. It's the standard tank. About 30 tons, goes maybe 30 miles an hour flat out, got that 75-millimeter main gun. Just ubiquitous.
And the sheer number they built is staggering. Almost 50,000 Shermans during the war. America basically weaponized the assembly line.
Totally dwarfed German production.
Yeah, but, and this is the crucial bit, Pat, that incredible quantity often masked a real quality problem when it came face-to-face with the top German tanks.
Right, and that brings us straight to fatal flaw number 1. The Sherman was just terrifyingly vulnerable in combat. Especially against the German heavies, the Tiger and the Panther.
Built differently, weren't they? The German tanks were more about defense, long-range hitting power.
Exactly. While the Sherman was more of a medium tank, designed for maneuver, exploiting breakthroughs. But the matchup was grim.
How grim are we talking, the range difference?
It was brutal. A Tiger, with its high-velocity 88-millimeter gun, it could punch right through a Sherman's front armor from over 2,000 meters.
2,000 meters, that's well over a mile.
Yeah. Your Sherman crew often wouldn't even know that you were being targeted until, bang, shelling coming.
So what chance did the Sherman have then?
Very little, head-on at range. They couldn't reliably penetrate the Tiger's thick front armor. They had to close the distance. Drastically. We're talking inside 600 meters, maybe?
Okay.
And even then, you're aiming for the sides, which are thinner. For a real kill shot, you probably need to get behind it, hit the engine deck or the rear turret.
Which sounds incredibly dangerous.
It was, and it led to this just awful tactical reality the Allies had to accept. The 5-to-1 rule.
Not just a saying, then. This was actual doctrine.
Cold, hard, operational necessity. The math was horrific, but straightforward. You needed 5 Shermans working together to have a decent shot at taking down 1 Tiger.
5. Okay. How did that work?
4 of them were basically bait. They'd maneuver like crazy, draw the Tiger's attention, pop smoke, anything to distract the German commander, get that big turret swinging away from the real threat.
Which was the 5th tank.
The 5th tank. Trying desperately to flank around, get that side or rear shot while the Tiger was busy with the decoys.
God, and the cost.
The strategists knew. They calculated that 4 out of those 5 Shermans probably weren't coming back from that kind of fight.
4 out of 5.
Yeah, it tells you everything about the courage of those crews, but also starkly highlights the equipment disadvantage they were dealing with.
But it wasn't just getting hit by German guns that was the problem, right?
Yeah.
There was something else.
Fire. The absolute terror for Sherman crews was fire, which is how we got that nickname, the Ronson.
Like the lighter. Light's first time every minute.
A horribly grim nickname, because it was true. Early studies, they showed anywhere from 55% to a shocking 80% of Shermans that took a penetrating hit just burst into flames. Instantly.
80%. Why? What caused that?
It was the ammo storage. In the early models, the big 75mm rounds were stored in racks right along the hull sides. Easy to access, sure, but totally exposed if the armor was breached.
So a hit there.
Ignites the propellant. The whole tank becomes an inferno in seconds. Crews had maybe 5–10 seconds to bail out, if they were lucky.
So horrifying. The psychological impact, knowing you're climbing into a potential death trap.
Absolutely. They called it a metal coffin for a reason. Morale definitely suffered. Now, to be fair, the Army did address this later.
They did. How?
They introduced wet storage, basically storing the ammo rounds inside canisters filled with water and antifreeze. That significantly cut down the fire risk.
Okay, that's something.
But it wasn't widely implemented fast enough for the guys fighting through France in '44. So you've got enemy fire, you've got the fire hazard.
Yeah.
But the second massive flaw, the one that almost crippled the advance, wasn't about combat damage at all.
Okay, what was it then?
It was the maintenance bottleneck.
Ah, right. So tanks weren't necessarily being destroyed beyond repair. They were just out of action.
Exactly. By late 1944, the shortage of tanks on the front line wasn't because Detroit stopped building them. America was churning them out faster than ever.
An incredible production feat.
Absolutely. The crisis was that tanks with relatively minor damage, a thrown track, a busted final drive, stuff that was definitely fixable, were just piling up behind the lines. Miles of them, waiting for repair.
Why? What was taking so long?
Bureaucracy, plain and simple. The official Army maintenance procedure for any major repair, even something like that track fix, was set at 48 to 72 hours.
72 hours. 3 full days.
3 days. For a tank that might be desperately needed just a few miles up the road.
That seems excessive. Why so long?
Because the manuals were written by engineers stateside. They were designed for perfect conditions, peacetime standards. They prioritized doing everything by the book, step-by-step disassembly, using only official parts, documenting everything.
Not exactly geared for battlefield reality.
Not even close. They demanded specific forms, signed off before a mechanic could even touch the tank. It was meticulous, standardized, and completely ignored the urgency of combat.
You can just imagine the commanders tearing their hair out.
Oh, they were. Screaming for tank support for their infantry, knowing they had dozens of repairable Shermans just sitting there, immobilized by procedure. Tanks sat and sat and sat, as one account put it.
There must be numbers that show how bad this got.
Oh, there are. Look at the 3rd Armored Division, famous unit, Spearhead. They went into combat after Normandy with 232 Shermans.
Okay.
By the end of the war in Europe, they had 648 of their tanks listed as completely destroyed. Total write-offs.
That's already nearly 3 times their initial strength.
Right. But here's the kicker. They also had another 700 tanks knocked out of action, repaired, and sent back into combat.
700. Repaired and returned.
Added up, that's a total operational loss rate, including the repaired ones, of 580%.
580%, that's staggering.
It means the division effectively burned through almost 6 complete sets of tanks to stay in the fight.
So the problem wasn't getting new tanks from the U.S. It was getting those 700 damaged but fixable ones back online fast enough. That 72-hour delay was the killer.
That was the bottleneck. It was costing lives, slowing down the push into Germany. It was a genuine crisis.
Okay, so against this backdrop of deadly tank flaws and crippling repair delays, that's where our unlikely hero steps onto the stage. Private First Class Jimmy Morrison.
Yeah. And the thing you got to stress is, by Army standards, he was completely unqualified for what he ended up doing. He was the opposite of an expert.
Just 19 years old.
19. Straight off an Iowa farm. Drafted in '43. Never been more than, 50 miles from home before that?
Education.
Standard high school diploma. 0 formal mechanical engineering training. The Army basically saw him as just another body, someone who knew vaguely which end of a wrench was which.
But they missed his real training, didn't they?
Completely missed it. His real school wasn't some Army motor pool course. It was the farm. Think about it. Your dad's big John Deere combine breaks down smack in the middle of harvest.
Yeah, time is critical. Weather's changing.
Exactly. You don't have a manual lying around. You probably don't have the exact spare part. And you absolutely do not have 3 days to fill out forms and wait.
You fix it. Now. With whatever you've got.
Whatever's in the barn. Baling wire, scrap metal, ingenuity. That was Jimmy's world. The sources mention him keeping the family's old 36 Ford pickup, running with baling wire and determination.
Ha! Love that.
He's a master of the improvise, get-it-done repair. The Army saw a grunt. They accidentally recruited a systems efficiency guru forged in the fires of the harvest schedule.
So he gets assigned to a motor pool behind the lines in France.
Yeah, just another pair of hands. And immediately there's this clash of cultures, this disconnect.
Between him and the trained mechanics.
Right. The Army trained guys, they knew the book, they worshiped the technical manual, they followed every step, torqued every bolt exactly as specified, ordered parts by the proper number. Procedure was everything.
They knew the how.
They knew the how according to the manual. Jimmy, though, he had that farmer's intuition. He understood how machines actually worked, how forces were distributed, what really mattered to keep something running under load.
That practical, hands-on knowledge.
Exactly. He understood leverage, stress points, and critically, he could tell the difference between a rule that ensured safety or function and a rule that just existed for bureaucratic neatness.
And watching the official mechanics, it drove him nuts.
According to the sources, yeah. He was genuinely angered by the inefficiency. He'd watched them spend hours taking apart an entire transmission just to get at one small bearing inside.
Something he knew could be reached faster.
Or watching them wait days for a simple steel pin or bracket that he could see was identical to something lying on the scrap heap, something he could modify to fit in maybe 20 minutes with a grinder.
Procedures designed for a factory floor in Detroit, not a muddy field in France with shells landing nearby.
Precisely. The procedures guaranteed standardization, maybe, but they were actively hindering the war effort in that context.
And for Jimmy, it wasn't just about wasted time, was it? It felt wrong.
It felt morally wrong.
Yeah.
He saw every tank sitting idle in that repair line as a failure. A failure to support the infantry guys up front who were relying on that armor cover. He knew, absolutely knew, he could fix them faster.
Not because he was smarter than the engineers who read the manual.
No, but because he could apply practical, common sense to the specific high-pressure situation they were in, a situation the manual writers back home just couldn't have fully grasped. And that frustration, that anger, it finally pushed him to act, to break the rules.
So what was the trigger? What was the specific incident that made Jimmy say, okay, enough's enough, I'm doing this my way?
It was a common, almost routine breakdown, a thrown track. Happens all the time in combat, especially moving fast over rough ground.
Right.
You hit something hard, a track pin shears, the track splits, and boom, your 30-ton tank is instantly immobilized.
Right, a simple mechanical failure, but it stops you dead.
Stops you dead. Now, the official Army technical manual procedure for replacing a single sheared track pin, it was a 6-hour job.
6 hours for one pin.
6 hours minimum, usually needing 3 mechanics. And here's why. The manual required removing 40 heavy-duty bolts.
40? Why so many?
Because those bolts held the final drive housing cover and the front idler wheel assembly in place. Essentially, the procedure made you dismantle a significant chunk of the tank's front end just to safely and properly access the area where you'd replace the broken pin section.
That sounds incredibly thorough, but also incredibly slow.
Exactly. Thorough, safe by the book, but agonizingly slow when tanks were desperately needed. Jimmy saw this, knew it was ridiculous. So the next time a Sherman clanked into the depot with a busted track, he made his move.
How? What did he do?
He waited. He waited for the supervising sergeant, a real stickler for the manual, to head off for lunch. If deliberate insubordination, calculated risk.
Okay, sergeant's gone. What's step 1 of the Jimmy method?
Step 1, forget disassembly. He needed slack in that heavy track, but without touching those 40 bolts. His insight was about leverage. He thought, what if I lift the whole side of the tank?
Lift a 30-ton tank.
He went over to the truck repair bay and borrowed a heavy-duty hydraulic jack. The kind meant for lifting big cargo trucks, not battle tanks.
Okay. Bit unorthodox.
Totally. He positioned it under the hull on the side with a broken track and just started pumping. He lifted that entire side of the Sherman maybe 6 inches off the ground.
And that gave him the slack he needed in the track.
Bingo. By changing the tank's geometry, lifting it, he created just enough looseness in the upper run of the track. No wrenches needed, just the jack. Brilliant, really.
Okay, track slackened. Step 2, get the broken pin out. Manual says unbolt, grind rivets.
Jimmy's method. Step 2, fire. He grabbed an acetylene cutting torch.
Whoa, okay. A cutting torch near fuel, oil, hydraulics. That sounds risky and definitely not in the manual.
Highly risky, completely unauthorized, but incredibly fast. He aimed the torch flame right at the sheared ends of the broken pins still in the track link. Zzzz, burned right through the damaged steel in maybe 60 seconds.
So 60 seconds with a torch replaced hours of disassembly.
That's the logic. High risk, high speed.
All right. Broken pin is out. Now he needs a new one. The manual says requisition part number XYZ.
Step 3. The biggest sin of all against Army logistics. Forget requisitions. Jimmy walks straight over to the scrap pile.
The graveyard of wrecked tanks and broken parts.
The place the Army saw as waste. Jimmy saw it as a parts store. He scavenged around until he found a piece of hardened steel rod, maybe from a destroyed truck's drive shaft, something tough. It had to be hardened steel to take the strain.
Right. Couldn't just be any old piece of metal.
Exactly. He found a suitable piece, took it over to a standard workshop bench grinder. He cut the rod to the right length, then carefully ground the ends down, tapering them precisely so they'd fit and lock into the track links just like the original pin. He literally manufactured a replacement part from scrap in minutes.
Okay, so jack up the tank, torch out the old pin, grind a new one from scrap. Total time?
90 minutes. 1.5 hours, start to finish. For a job the manual said took 6 hours.
That's a 4.5-hour saving. 75% faster.
75% faster. The tank was running, ready to go back.
Until the sergeant came back from lunch, that must have been tense.
Well, you can imagine. Sergeant walks back, sees the tank fixed, sees the telltale scorch marks on the track from the torch, sees the obviously improvised, non-standard pin Jimmy just hammered in.
He must have blown a gasket.
Apparently, yes. Furious. Yelling about regulations, safety violations, ignoring the TM, using unauthorized tools, unauthorized parts. He had every reason to write Jimmy up for court-martial. Wartime negligence was no joke. But then reality hits. The sergeant looks at the perfectly functional Sherman. He checks his watch 90 minutes, then he looks over at the queue. There are 12 other Shermans lined up, all waiting for similar repairs, mostly tracks. And he knows there's a big infantry push scheduled for tomorrow morning that needs every single tank they can get.
The rules versus the mission.
Right there, in that moment, bureaucracy versus operational need. The sergeant apparently just stood there for a minute, then swallowed hard and gave the order that changed everything. Something like, "All right, Morrison, show me again, slowly, and then you teach these other clowns exactly how you did it."
Wow. He chose reality.
He chose reality. That was the breakthrough. And Jimmy's thinking it wasn't just about track pins. It was a whole philosophy. He started seeing the Sherman, as the source says, not as a complex military vehicle, but as a machine, a collection of parts.
Parts that could be swapped or fixed more easily if you just ignored the official step-by-step instructions?
Exactly. He realized the Sherman's design, while flawed for combat, was actually pretty good for quick repairs if you thought outside the box. Like the transmission. It was mounted at the front.
Right.
The manual often required taking the whole turret off to do major engine or transmission work. Huge job. Jimmy figured out that if you just unbolted the big front armor plate, the entire transmission assembly could be slid straight out the front. Saved hours, maybe days, of messing with the turret.
Clever. What else?
The suspension bogies. Those units with the wheels on the side, they took a beating from mines and rough terrain.
Complex bits of kit, I imagine.
Very. Lots of springs and wheels. The manual said if a bogie was damaged, mechanics had to painstakingly rebuild it in place, lying in the mud, swapping out individual springs and wheels. Took forever.
Jimmy's way.
He looked at it and saw that the whole bogie unit was just bolted onto the hull with a few massive, easy-to-reach bolts. His idea. Why rebuild it here? Unbolt the entire damaged bogie, maybe a 30-minute job.
Okay.
Then go to the scrap pile, find a wrecked tank with an undamaged bogie, unbolt that one, and bolt it straight onto the tank you're fixing. Another 30 minutes, tank fixed in an hour.
And the damaged bogie.
Send the whole damaged unit back to a rear area workshop where they have proper tools and time to rebuild it properly later. Swap components, don't repair them in the field under pressure.
Modular thinking. And that leads back to the scrap pile, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That was his other huge innovation. Army logistics saw a tank with its turret blown off as battlefield salvage or total loss. File the report, forget about it.
But Jimmy saw.
A gold mine. He saw a perfectly good engine, a working transmission, intact final drives, usable bogies, undamaged track sections, all sitting there waiting to be harvested. He started cannibalizing.
So instead of waiting weeks for a brand new transmission shipped from the States,
he could pull a perfectly good used one from a total loss wreck in maybe 4 hours and have another tank back in the fight by evening. He created his own unofficial, super efficient circular supply chain right there in the mud. It saved time and it saved valuable new parts for tanks that really needed them. Revolutionary stuff.
Okay, so the speed is amazing, the efficiency is undeniable. But let's just touch on the risk again. Why were the regulations so strict? It wasn't just about being slow, right?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
The rules existed for reasons, primarily standardization and liability. Standardization meant any mechanic anywhere could theoretically work on any tank using the same parts and procedures. Predictability.
And liability.
If Jimmy's non-standard scrap heap track pin sheared under stress during combat and the tank was lost or the crew injured, Who's responsible?
Jimmy would be. Big time.
Big time. Wartime negligence, potentially endangering troops. The consequences could have been catastrophic for him personally, maybe even the death penalty in theory. Using unauthorized methods, non-standard parts, it was a huge gamble.
But the irony is the official method, that 72-hour delay, was also getting crews killed, just indirectly, by leaving them without tank support when they desperately needed it.
That's the paradox. And the field commanders, the guys on the ground responsible for taking objectives and keeping their men alive, they understood this trade-off perfectly. Waiting 3 days for a by-the-book repair often meant unacceptable infantry casualties now.
So the procedure itself was failing the reality of combat.
It was. And that's why the commanders started doing something remarkable. They looked the other way. They saw the results, tanks getting fixed incredibly fast, and they chose not to ask too many questions about how.
Just happy to get their armor back online.
It's ecstatic. And the impact was measurable, dramatic even. In the weeks after Jimmy started his alternative methods and began teaching others, his battalion's operational tank availability rate, the percentage of tanks actually ready to fight reportedly jumped from a pretty poor 60%.
Meaning 4 out of 10 tanks were down at any time.
Right. It would jump from 60% to an incredible 85% in about 6 weeks.
Wow, that's a game changer. That's winning the war kind of stuff.
It really was. An operational transformation driven entirely by quiet, common sense rule breaking.
But it had to stay quiet, right? This wasn't official yet.
Oh, completely unofficial. It became this sort of secret network. Jimmy taught his core techniques to a few trusted guys, then they taught others. Maybe 3 mechanics at first, then 5, then a dozen or more, working across the repair companies.
And they all had to be in on it, keeping it quiet.
Had to be. They had to be fast, efficient, and crucially, they had to be masters of paperwork deception.
Ah, the paperwork. How did they manage that?
That was the genius of it. The actual work involved torches, grinders, and parts pulled from wrecks. But the records, the maintenance logs, the parts requisitions that went up the chain of command, they had to look completely legitimate.
So creative accounting.
Basically, yeah. They logged, they used official new parts that maybe never actually arrived, or they'd claim the salvage components were used to patch up the total loss vehicles before they were written off.
Yeah.
They created a shadow inventory system, a conspiracy of efficiency.
And the key thing was the repairs held up, right? This wasn't just quick and dirty.
That's critical. The sources emphasize this. Jimmy's farm background taught him that a fix isn't a fix if it breaks again tomorrow. His improvised repairs had to be durable. They used hardened steel for pins. They ensured components were fitted correctly. The speed was only tolerated because the tanks he and his network fixed didn't break down again disproportionately. They performed reliably in combat.
So this whole underground operation keeps rolling along until it gets seriously tested.
Until the moment of truth. The ultimate showdown between Jimmy's battlefield expediency and the Army's rigid bureaucracy, December 1944. The Battle of the Bulge.
Germany's massive, desperate last gamble in the West, a huge surprise offensive.
Exactly. Speed and shock were the German tactics. The Allies were caught off guard, reeling back. They needed every single tank, every gun, every man they could get to stem the tide. It was chaos.
And Jimmy's battalion, how are they doing?
They were performing miracles. Amidst the chaos, their repair depot was churning out fixed Shermans faster than the Germans could knock them out nearby. Their availability rates were just unbelievably high compared to other units.
Which sounds great, but probably drew some attention.
Drew exactly the wrong kind of attention. High command, specifically Army Ordnance, noticed these suspiciously excellent numbers coming from one particular sector. It looked too good to be true. They suspected corners were being cut, maybe dangerous ones, or even fraud.
So they sent someone to investigate.
They sent a colonel. An ordnance colonel, a real by-the-book officer whose entire career was built on enforcing standardization, procedure, and accountability. He arrived with a mandate to find out what on earth was going on.
This sounds bad for Jimmy.
It looked like the end of the line. The colonel spent several days digging deep. He went through all the maintenance logs, the parts requests, cross-referencing everything. He physically inspected the tanks in the repair bays, looking for non-standard work.
Talking to crews.
Yeah, interviewing the tank crews, asking if they felt their vehicles were sound, if they'd noticed anything unusual about the repairs. He spotted the discrepancies, the speed, the lack of official parts trails, maybe even seeing those telltale marks on bogies that matched numbers from the total loss inventory list. He knew something was up.
And eventually, he calls Jimmy in.
Eventually, Private First Class Morrison is summoned. Stands there, probably bracing for the worst. Court-martial, disgrace, maybe even prison time for endangering the war effort through negligence.
Did he deny it?
No, the accounts say the colonel laid out the evidence, the violated regulations, the missing paperwork trails, the physical signs of improvisation. And Jimmy, knowing the game was up, confessed everything, admitted to using the jack, the torch, the scrap parts, ignoring the manual, violating, as he apparently put it, more regulations than I can count.
Just laid it all out there.
Laid it all out. The tension must have been immense. You've got the colonel, embodiment of the rules, facing this 19-year-old farm kid who's basically admitted to throwing the rule book away.
And the colonel.
The colonel listened. He looked at Jimmy. He looked at the evidence against him, the broken rules. But then he looked at the other evidence. The battalion's incredible tank availability rate during the most critical battle of the winter, and the documented fact that the tanks Jimmy's network fixed had a flawless record of mechanical reliability in combat.
So the results spoke for themselves.
The results were undeniable. And the colonel delivered a verdict that must have stunned everyone. He acknowledged the violations, didn't sweep them under the rug, but then he said something like, "Private, your work is." Well, it's flawless from an operational standpoint. These tanks work. They stay in the fight. Your techniques are faster, simpler, and, frankly, given the circumstances, probably safer than sticking to a manual that takes 3 days.
Wow. Vindication.
More than vindication. The colonel wasn't there to bust Jimmy. He was there because the results were so good the Army needed to know how he was doing it so they could copy it.
He was there to learn from the rule breaker.
Exactly. He essentially told this 19-year-old kid that his new job was to formally document his forbidden techniques so they could be taught to every other tank mechanic fighting in Europe. The system, faced with undeniable proof of superior efficiency that was saving lives and tanks, had no choice but to adapt. Common sense won.
So that confrontation, that moment during the bulge, wasn't the end for Jimmy. It was the beginning of something huge for the Army.
It was a pivot point. Jimmy Morrison's methods, born out of necessity and farm-honed ingenuity, were rapidly documented, formalized, probably cleaned up a bit for the official manuals, and then officially adopted. By 1945, they were standard U.S. Army procedure.
And they gave it a name.
They did. Acknowledging the context, they called them field-expedient repairs. The name itself signals a shift in thinking.
Field expedient meaning do what works quickly in the field situation you're in.
Precisely. It wasn't just adding new pages to the manual. It was embedding a philosophy. It recognized that battlefield maintenance needs flexibility. It acknowledged that the engineer's ideal solution back in a lab isn't always the best solution when you're under fire and time is everything. Context matters.
And this gave the Allies a real edge, didn't it, in the final push?
A massive edge. Think about the comparison. The German system, historically quite rigid and centralized, often required damaged tanks, even with repairable issues, to be shipped way back to rear area depots for meticulous factory standard rebuilds. It took weeks sometimes.
While
American mechanics, using Jimmy's field expedient techniques, were now routinely doing major component swaps, engine transmission, bogies right near the front lines, often in a matter of hours, using cannibalized parts, using torches and jacks, whatever it took.
So the speed of repair became a weapon in itself.
A huge force multiplier. The U.S. could take losses, pull tanks back, fix them using these faster methods, and push them right back into the line, sometimes the same day. It meant the Allies could maintain a higher operational tempo and strength, constantly maximizing the number of tanks available for combat.
The Germans just couldn't keep up with that turnaround time.
They couldn't knock tanks out faster than Jimmy and his disciples could put them back together. It fundamentally undermined the German ability to win through attrition on the Western Front.
So when we boil this whole story down, what's the big takeaway for us listening to this deep dive?
I think it's a really powerful lesson about where valuable knowledge actually comes from. It often doesn't come from the official credentials, the fancy degrees, or the thickness of the manual.
It comes from experience.
It comes from practical, hands-on, necessity-driven experience. Jimmy, the kid who knew how to keep a rusty old Ford running with bits of wire, understood the Sherman's real needs in combat better than the brilliant engineers who designed it on paper.
And the system, the giant military bureaucracy, eventually had to bow to that practical reality.
Had to. It was forced to adapt its own rigid standards to the common sense of this one young guy because his way just worked better. It saved tanks, it saved time, and ultimately it saved lives.
It's a classic case of rules sometimes protecting the process more than the mission.
Exactly. And sometimes the real innovator, the person who actually saves the day, isn't the one who follows the rules perfectly, but the one who understands why the rules exist and is willing to break them for the right reasons to get the job done effectively when the established way is clearly failing. #outro.
So we've gone from the grim reality of the Ronson nickname and that staggering 580% loss rate
Mm.
through the sheer frustration of that 3-day repair bottleneck.
Yeah, that bureaucratic nightmare. All the way to the Army, officially adopting field-expedient repairs, basically institutionalizing the common sense of an Iowa farm kid. It really makes you think about what expertise truly means.
It really does. It shows that at the end of the day, theory and procedure, they have to serve reality, not the other way around, especially when the stakes are high. The person who actually knows how to use the jack and the torch, the practical knowledge, that's what delivers when it counts.
Absolutely. And that kind of brings us to our final thought, something for you to chew on after this deep dive.
Okay.
If Jimmy's methods using scrap, improvising, breaking the official rules were proven to be faster, just as reliable, and arguably safer in the context of saving lives at the front, well, it makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Wonder what?
How many other critical processes, maybe even today, in our workplaces, in industries, in government, are being slowed down? How many are hampered by rigid rules and regulations that were designed for a completely different time or situation?
Procedures that exist just because. Well, that's how it's always been done.
Exactly. How often are we still meticulously counting out 40 bolts, metaphorically speaking, because the manual says so, when maybe, just maybe, there's a hydraulic jack and a cutting torch sitting right there that could solve the problem in a fraction of the time? Who's daring to pick them
A
up?
powerful question indeed, something to definitely think about until our next deep dive.